I first met Margo when she sought me out with an unusual request to end her life. It wasn't the kind of offer that normally crossed my desk, but there was something about her that intrigued me. Margo Purifoy claimed to be immortal, and she wasn't joking. For 3 months, she tried to convince me of her condition, but I doubted it, of course. No one could be immortal, right? She reached out to me through the dark web, offering me $100,000 to find a way to kill her. But no matter what method we tried, she survived. The more I tried to end her life, the more fascinated I became. After numerous attempts, shooting, stabbing, poisoning, nothing worked. Every time she would simply smile and say, "Did it work?" Her condition was something I couldn't explain, and it bewildered me. She had lived for centuries, outlasting empires, watching history unfold over the ages. Yet despite all of this, Margo wanted nothing more than to die. "Why do you want to die?" I asked her one day. She replied, "When you've lived as long as I have, seen what I've seen, everything becomes meaningless. Death is the only thing I have left to control." That's when I started to care for her. I didn't want to admit it, but I was falling for her. Over time, we grew closer. The longer we spent together, the more I understood her pain. The desire to die was not just a fleeting wish. It was an existential burden that had been eating away at her for centuries. I promised her that I would help her end her life. We tried everything: fireworks, electrocution, even setting her up for car accidents. Every attempt failed, and she didn't even flinch. But eventually, after countless failures, she gave up and said she had accepted her fate. "I've wasted your time," she told me, handing me a briefcase full of money. "But I can't keep this up anymore." But something in me wanted to keep trying. We made love that night, and in the morning, I made a promise. I would never leave her. I had come to love her more than life itself. I wanted to help her find peace, to give her the one thing she craved: death. We married. We had a child. We built a family. And yet, despite the joy that we found in each other, Margo's depression never fully went away. I would find her sometimes trying to overdose or using knives in desperate attempts to end her life. Nothing worked. The years passed, and our son began to grow up. He began to notice the sadness in his mother's eyes. He asked me, "Why does Mom want to die?" I couldn't answer him. I couldn't explain why his mother, despite having everything, still longed for death. Her attempts to take her life continued, and I realized that I could no longer sit by and let this torment continue. I consulted the dark web again, searching for something that might break this cycle. That's when I found it: a ritual, a spell that promised to transfer her immortality to me. If I couldn't end her life, I would take her curse upon myself. She agreed to the ritual. We performed it together, and in the morning, everything changed. Our souls had switched bodies. She was mortal now, and I was the one who was immortal. I took the gun that she had handed me and did what I had promised her. I ended her life, watching as her body finally breathed its last. But something went terribly wrong. The curse had a twist that I hadn't anticipated. Once I killed her, I realized that I would never be able to die. I was trapped in her body, condemned to live forever, watching as everyone I loved aged and passed away. The curse was now mine. I watched as our son grew up and eventually grew old, knowing that I would never age. I would never die. The pain of watching everyone I loved leave me behind was unbearable. I was no longer just a man. I was a ghost, trapped in a world that would never let me go. As the years passed, I realized that there was one thing I had never asked Margo. What did it really mean to die? What did it mean to live, if everything you loved was doomed to fade away while you remain? So now I begin my journey anew, searching for answers. I must learn to live with this curse, to accept what I have become, and maybe along the way I can discover what it means to truly die. Maybe in the end, I can learn to live. Every elementary school has its own urban legend, but ours had Muppet Man. He was the terrifying figure who lived in the massive oak tree by the schoolyard. Muppet Man wasn't a typical monster. He was a deformed man with the proportions of a marionette puppet. After a botched plastic surgery left him that way, he stole a rainbow-colored costume from the school theater and wore it everywhere. He made his home in the branches of the old tree, and some kids said he lived in the trunk, eating caterpillar larvae, and even torturing the ghost of a boy named Jason Hughes. Jason wasn't an urban legend. He was real, a troubled, quiet kid who often got picked on, especially by me. I remember how he always seemed to have large glasses and spent more time drawing than anything else. Jason disappeared one evening in second grade, and a few days later, his clothes were found at the base of the schoolyard oak. The teacher told us they were clean, but my dad, a cop at the time, told me they were covered in blood, feces, and urine. The details haunted me and fueled my hatred of Muppet Man. No one could say his name without the younger kids bringing up Jason's tragedy. As time passed, I found myself ostracized, not only because Jason was my neighbor, but also because my dad had arrested some of the parents of the kids at my school. I retreated into myself, spending recess reading books under that same oak tree. I began to feel sorry for Jason, imagining his ghost hanging around the schoolyard, and sometimes I even pretended I was reading to him. One afternoon in February, I arrived at school late. The air was still and cold, and the sky was a dull steel gray. It was the kind of day that made everything feel fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. I walked slowly across the recess yard, and when I passed the oak tree, I realized it was dying. The branches were bare, covered in mistletoe, and the bark looked dark and cracked. But then something caught my eye, a flash of color among the branches. I froze. Suddenly, a Muppet-like creature appeared, brightly colored with neon fur. It had the proportions of a cartoon character, absurdly distorted, yet impossibly real. The creature spoke to me in a voice that was disturbingly friendly. "Hello," it said. It wasn't just a hallucination. It was Muppet Man, and he knew me, just as he had known Jason. "You can call me Muppet Man," he said. "I'm real, just like Jason." I ran back to the school, horrified, and hid in the nurse's office. When I told the nurse about Muppet Man and Jason, the school went into lockdown and the police arrived. But they didn't find anything unusual. The tree was still there, silent and dead, just like before. A few weeks later, I came home from a trip to my grandparents' house. I tried to forget what I'd seen, but the night I returned, I found tufts of neon fur scattered across my pillow. Muppet Man had followed me. In the coming days, I found more fur around my room. I couldn't escape him. One day, I even found a note from Muppet Man, inviting me to meet him at the school tree that night. My father reluctantly agreed to take me to the school that night. When we arrived, the tree looked healthy again, vibrant and full of life. Muppet Man appeared from the branches, but something was different. The fur was gone, replaced with a decayed, dead version of himself. He removed his mask to reveal Jason Hughes's face, distorted and broken. Jason was trapped inside Muppet Man's body, unable to escape. I screamed, but my father didn't understand. The tree and the creature were gone by the time we returned home. The next few weeks were a blur of confusion and fear. The world seemed to lose its color, and I was haunted by the image of Muppet Man's glowing eyes. My father insisted it was just a breakdown, but deep down, I knew something much darker was at play. Months later, the police discovered that Muppet Man's costume was gone from evidence. It had vanished, along with Jason's body. That news shook me to my core. Then the unthinkable happened. Dirty tufts of neon fur appeared on my bedroom floor again. Muppet Man was back, and I had no idea how to escape him. I'm going to make this as short and as clear as possible. If you find any Christmas presents under your tree after Christmas Day that you didn't place there, call the police. Leave the house immediately, and whatever you do not open the gift. I lived with my wife Maria and my 2 young boys in Melbourne, Australia. That's where my wife is originally from, and most of her family lives less than an hour from us. On Christmas Day, we usually have a lot of presents under the tree. Gifts from me and my wife, gifts from grandparents, gifts from the boys, all are placed there. That's why last Christmas we weren't worried when I found a present under the tree that neither me or my wife had put there. It could have been from one of our parents when they came to visit on Christmas Eve. It could have been from one of the boys. It could have been from many people, and we didn't give it a second thought. It had no gift tag on it, so we decided to leave it there, and not open it until we found out who it for and who sent it. So when I got up on the 26th early to make coffee, that was the only present left under the tree. It was a small box, maybe 6 inches tall and 6 inches wide, wrapped in bright red wrapping paper. There was a little green bow on top, and it all looked expertly wrapped. But when I came out into the living room that morning, there was something off about that present that I couldn't place. It wasn't until later that I realized the wrapping paper had been completely green on Christmas Day, and it wasn't until later that I noticed that red had leaked on the floor around the present as well. Throughout the day, our kids played with their new Christmas loot as Maria and I called different relatives, asking if they left a little red gift under our tree. As the day went by and more family members told us that they hadn't sent a gift, we started to get confused. We weren't worried, but we were definitely puzzled. There had been no signs of a break-in or any forced entry, but the gift had to have come from somewhere. Mary and I spent the entire day trying to figure it out, and when night came around, we were mentally exhausted. We put the kids to bed and followed soon after. Now I'm usually a pretty heavy sleeper, but something woke me up that night. I'm not sure if it was a noise I heard or if I just had too much coffee during the day, but I found myself wide awake at 2 a.m. and my throat was dry as hell. I finally slid out from under the covers and slipped into my slippers, careful not to wake Maria sleeping next to me. I walked out of our bedroom to the kitchen, almost slipping on some spilled water on the floor. Muttering a curse, I turned on the kitchen light and poured myself a glass of water from the refrigerator. I stood there in silence for a few minutes, drinking my water as I leaned against the kitchen counter. My mind was occupied with travel plans. We were going to Japan for New Year's. And when I finished the water, I put my glass in the sink and turned around to turn off the light. By chance, I happened to glance over to the hallway that connected to the living room, and that was when I froze. From where I stood, I could see right to our Christmas tree, and I saw that the mysterious present had been opened. And what I had almost slipped on, what I had first thought was spilled water, was revealed to be a trail of bright red blood leading from the opened present towards the bedrooms. My body was frozen in shock for a few minutes, but I quickly snapped out of it. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife we had and I crept over to the hallway, careful not to make a sound. My heart was racing as I followed the trail of crimson back towards the bedrooms, and my blood froze when I realized that it was leading me into the boys' room. I stood outside the bedroom doorway for a moment, trying to build up my courage for whatever waited for me in the darkness. Then I sprang into action, running into the room and switching on the lights in one quick movement. I had tried to prepare myself, but what I saw made the knife slip out of my hand and my jaw drop in horror. My boys had twin beds, one on either side of the room. Micah, the oldest, was on the left side, and Jamie, who was a year younger, was on the right. I saw Micah first, sleeping soundly and wrapped in his sheets. But when I turned to Jamie, I almost threw up. His sheets had been thrown off the bed, and he was sprawled out across his mattress in an unnaturally rigid pose. His limbs were bent back in ways that no bones should be able to move, and his unseeing eyes were open and stared up at the ceiling. Blood covered his pillow, his mattress, everything. Attached to his neck was the most hideous thing I'd ever seen. It was like a cross between a leech and a slug, and was easily almost 2 feet long and almost a fourth of that in width, and the thing was latched onto his neck. It was smooth and slimy and dark green, almost the exact same color of a Christmas pine. But as I stared at it for a moment, I realized it wasn't attached to his neck. It was in his neck. The creature had torn open Jamie's throat and had burrowed its head into the exposed wound. As I stared on in horror, I saw the thing pulse and writhe as it fed off of my dead son's blood, and God knows what else. For a cursed minute, I couldn't move. I couldn't even look away. I stared on in frozen horror before I finally tore myself away and stumbled back into the hallway. I knew Jamie was dead without having to check, and I knew that I had to call the police. But I think I was going into shock because all I could think of in the moment was to stagger into the living room to inspect the present. It was then that I saw that the box was logged through with blood, and the top of the box had been ripped off by the creature that was held inside. There was something in there that I couldn't make out, which the police later identified as a dismembered hand, most likely put there to feed the creature once the box had been sealed. Yet when I bent down to inspect the box, I saw a small scrap of white paper that was perfectly unstained by the blood. I picked it up with shaky hands, and I was barely able to make out the words written on it in impeccable cursive. This is the gift that awaits everyone on the naughty list. Let it be a warning to you all. Cole is hungry, and he will feed. Merry Christmas. SOC more.